Hey, Mormon Brother Evo! Welcome to Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a tremendous podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre, who does such good work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. I've been talking a lot about these secret scrimmages, these exhibition tune-ups, what have you, over the last few days, and speculating as to why I just don't make a ton out of them. Well, now we finally get a coach's perspective on it, as for those that have listened to this podcast, you know this. For those that have not, well, you're in for a treat, because Ryan, he was a part of the coaching staff when South Carolina was able to make the Final Four many years ago. He was a part of Bob Huggins' coaching staff as well. So we're going to talk with him about just what the mindset of those teams that he was on was with regards to these exhibition matchups and just how some of these things work as well. Because a lot of people think that with these secret scrimmages, what have you, it's just a normal 40 minutes as if you're going to be playing a normal game. That's typically not the case, which is why these results are typically skewed, and just another reason why if you see some harebrained result in these secret scrimmages and these exhibition matchups, then you probably don't want to be flying off the handle and overreacting. But there is something that you want to be taking a look at a little bit more on the individual front, and there's a very intriguing name drop that is going to be had by Ryan, talking about a guy that he was able to see up close and in person and knew right then that he was going to be a superstar. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the landscape of college basketball and just how the transfer portal has actually been helping out some of these mid-majors, and how while you have some of these teams that they lose their 20-point per game scorer at the lower level, they're able to pick up so many of these guys that are, for lack of a better term, cast-offs at power conferences, and how these teams have been able to elevate, and what teams to be taking a look at both at the mid-major conference level along with the power conference level that he's feeling a little bit bullish on. So we're going to have a nice wide-ranging chat with Ryan in a few minutes. I do have to take one break on this podcast, and we'll be doing that very shortly. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, and I beggeth you, I pleadeth you, just please do send these in, as I do want to know what you want to hear on this podcast to get set for the upcoming college basketball season. And the way to be able to do that is one of two ways. Let me know what you want to hear via my Twitter/X timeline at Judith_D1. Keep in mind those letters, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way, that is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. So please do let it be known what you want to hear on this podcast, and what you're going to be hearing today is a great chat with Ryan. We're going to get you guys set for, shall we say, secret scrimmage season, get a little bit more inside baseball on how these work, take a look at a few particular teams as well that he's feeling a bit bullish on, and just these mid-majors, how they're going to be able to rise up. And also we're going to be talking about this as well, why there is probably going to be a lot of money to be made on these mid-majors, because other than your two demonstrative teams like McNeese, Gonzaga, there should be a lot of competitive mid-major conferences this year. We're going to be chatting about that and so much more with Ryan on the flip side, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family of Podcasts. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such good work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and he's able to lend such great insight because he has been a part of coaching staffs, was a part of that South Carolina team that was able to make the Final Four, was on Bob Huggins' staff for a few years out there in West Virginia. He still does a lot with West Virginia with the Ryan and Rush show. You're able to get that if you're a fan of West Virginia sports. And then for all of his work with regards to college basketball for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, he does the college experience with one of our good friends in Kobe Dant. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled M-A-C. And Ryan, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Greg, I appreciate you having me. Hey, we're 6 weeks away from opening night.
We are getting closer and closer, my friend. And with that, that means that we're going to be getting a lot of these exhibitions. We're going to be getting a lot of these scrimmages within the next few weeks as well. And what should we be taking away from these scrimmages? Because you ask 5 different people and you'll get like 2 or 3 people that say that they mean absolutely nothing. And then you'll get 2 people that if they see their favorite team win or lose a scrimmage by 10 points, it either means that they're going to the Final Four, they should can their coach, and there's not a lot of in between. So I want to get a little bit of a perspective from someone that has actually been a part of a coaching staff in terms of what goes into these scrimmages, these exhibitions, and what to really make out of them.
Yeah, so a lot of the time it's controlled scrimmages too, where the coaches will agree that they're going to play a 40-minute game, then they're going to do situations at the end. One year, I was in South Carolina. We went to Virginia Tech with Buzz Williams. We did situations, 3-on-2, 4-on-3 drills, into 2-on-1 continuous. So it's kind of just however these coaches set it up. A lot of the time it is coaches that are really good friends, and I think that they will talk prior to what they're trying to get out of it. Do they want to throw a zone offensive, zone defense segment in there just to help prepare them for the season? I don't take too much into it just because of even the new era that we're in with the NIL and transfer portal. These teams are still only a couple weeks into their practice schedules where they're really just trying to find their identity and get ready for opening night. So I put probably even less stock into the exhibition games just because of all the turnover in these rosters and just trying to mesh pieces and figure out what they got.
And how much with these scrimmages is it a lot of times coaches, as you mentioned, especially the teams with moving parts? Because I feel like we know what we're getting out of a team that brings back a lot, like a Marquette, for example. I feel like we know what we can expect out of them, whereas a team like Louisville that brings back literally no scoring whatsoever, they're still trying to figure themselves out. How much do you just take a look at that aspect of things and you think, all right, maybe a coach is just trying out a rotation for the sake of trying out a rotation?
Absolutely, because you want to find out before you tip off the game on November 4th. The last thing you want to do is not know anything about your team on November 4th, and you're in a barn burner and a bye game, and you're trying to figure out how to get a win. So I think a lot of these coaches use these 2 secret scrimmages, or charity exhibition is the other one that's become more popular, where they can play around with some rotations, see what guys can play with each other, what lineups can play zone, which lineups you can run certain offensive sets. So, yeah, I definitely think the teams that have a lot coming back, that have all this experience, which is so rare in college basketball, definitely will have the advantage in these exhibition and scrimmages.
Yep, no doubt about it. And I think that is so well said. As joining me on the show, we do have one of our good friends, Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And is there anything that can be taken away from more or less like the individual performances / rotations like we were talking about a little bit before? Because I think that the results themselves really do not matter unless if you see something so glaring that it's not even funny. Like, I still remember a few years ago, Pepperdine was playing Point Loma's, a good D2 university. I'm not going to disparage Point Loma here, but when they were losing to them by 20 points, I was thinking, yeah, this might not be the year for Pepperdine, and, well, they got destroyed that season. But is it maybe a case where we want to be taking a look at individuals a little bit more than the team itself?
I do agree with that. I'll take you back to, I think, what was it, 2015? We played Ohio State at West Virginia, and it was D'Angelo Russell's freshman year. And we knew that he had expectations. He was a highly touted kid. And we were in the Press Virginia days. He came out and scored almost 40 on us. So, and it was a back and forth, great game. 2 really good teams that were going to be top 15 teams. And you could just see right away that this kid was not just an ordinary freshman. He was going to contribute right away. And it was why he was able to be a one and done and be the number 2 pick in the draft later that spring. So I think definitely looking at the freshmen or the newcomers, how do they fit in? Is the moment too big, or is the athleticism too much for them? Is one of the main things I'll take a look at.
Yep, I think that is so well said, and I think that is a good launching point as well. Are there a few players that you're looking at that maybe we're not talking about a ton coming into the college basketball season that you think could be difference makers? Because we always talk about the big-time transfers that are coming in, like Aiden Mahaney going to UConn. I think that he's going to be able to have a rock-solid season. K-Leaf battle going on over to Gonzaga, but is there maybe a guy that busted out towards the back half of the year last year? Is there maybe an under-the-radar transfer that should be getting a little bit more love than what we're giving them right now?
I had Will Wade on the other day, and I'm really looking forward to his team. He does bring back a Christian Shoemate, but a lot of new pieces, guys transferring down from the Power 5 level. How is he going to be able to mesh those different egos, personalities? Because a lot of these guys are going down there to put up big numbers so that they can get that next contract, like they like to say, and get a payday. Guys like Brandon Murray, guys like Quinn Copeland, Sincere Parker, guys that have been at bigger programs now taking a step down. So I am looking forward to seeing some guys that are kind of just trying to get a little bit of a bounce back here from where they were last year.
And I'm so glad that you bring that up as well, because I feel like many years ago when the transfer portal was first starting to become a thing, many people thought that this was going to be the end of the mid-majors, that mid-majors were going to be at such a big deficit because they are going to lose a lot of their top players, and that has happened. When you see a guy bust out for like 18 to 20 points per game at the Big South level, the Atlantic Sun, insert your mid-major here, oftentimes they do move up. But how much do you think that it's actually benefited these mid-major teams? Because when you've got a guy that is on insert your power conference team here that's only averaging 2 to 3 points per game, not getting a lot of minutes, that they transfer down a level. And I oftentimes think that with these mid-major teams, they're getting players that they would have never been able to get in recruiting. And that, in my opinion, has actually probably helped out the mid-majors a little bit more than it's hurt them.
Yeah, and especially with coming out of it finally, but the super senior COVID year guys. So where you would get an extra year, drawing a blank on his name, but the guy Towns, the guy that finished at Howard, that was at Harvard.
He still had another year of eligibility if you wanted it too. That's the most hilarious part.
I know, it's crazy. I started getting to the point where I don't even know what year these guys are. It was like, he's a junior. It's like, all right, is he a real junior, or is he a super junior, or is he
a Van Wilder junior?
Yeah, exactly. And it does benefit. We're going through the mid-major conference previews right now, kind of like yourself, and it is fascinating just to see which leagues get hit harder than others. We did the Patriot League the other night. They found a way to keep a lot of their rosters intact. I don't know if that's because of their academic standards, but then you look at like an A's Sun, where it just looked like they got rated every single roster. So I think it's kind of a league to league, and if these programs and athletic departments have enough money to invest with a little bit of NIL.
Yeah, the Metro Atlantic, the MAAC, as I like to call it. Some people call it the MAC. I always want to try to discern the two. They have been absolutely destroyed by the transfer portal as well. The NEC has certainly been one of those conferences as well. And I'm so glad that you do bring that up, because I am a sucker for being able to talk Patriot League basketball at any time of the year. I think that it is going to be interesting, because with Colgate, they have been the big bad wolf out there. They've been able to be very minty fresh in terms of getting to the NCAA tournament, if you get my drift there, over the last few seasons. But they seem to be a team that's going to be a little bit down. And I feel like with the Patriot League, you've got a bunch of slow, controlled teams that I think can cover a lot of games in non-conference. And I look at teams like a Bucknell, a rock-solid defense. Now they need a little bit more on offense in Boston, along with American, and I think that they could all contend for the Patriot League this season.
I completely agree with you, Greg, and we talked about this the other night. It's kind of a perfect storm for all these other 9 programs that have just been getting dominated by Colgate. Colgate is losing a bunch of their roster, and don't get me wrong, they're still going to be really good, but these other teams are returning almost all their production and are a year older. American, Lehigh, Bucknell, Boston, Navy. And maybe we see finally Colgate get picked off for the first time in 6-7 years there in the Patriot League. So I'm with you. I think it's going to be one of the more fascinating mid-major leagues, because you're not going to see a 16-2 Colgate this year. I think it's going to be a closer 12-6-ish type team wins the league.
Yep, I'm right there with you, as we do have Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And certainly there are going to be a few teams that dominate their conference. Gonzaga out there in the WCC, I think that that's a very obvious one. Yeah. Grand Canyon in the WAC. We were mentioning a little bit before the Southland. Even though you bring back Stephen F. Austin, I think that it's clear that McNeese is creme de la creme out there. But how big do you think that it is that we only have a few of those conferences, the ones that I mentioned a little bit before, whereas a conference like the Summit League, where South Dakota State have been able to dominate for so long, they seem to be in a little bit of transition. And then I know that this is one of your favorite conferences as well. It just feels like in the Sun Belt, it's always wide open. James Madison going through a little bit of a coaching change, Appalachian State losing a lot of guys, and we saw Southern Miss go from being like a bottom feeder in Conference USA a few years ago to being towards the top 2 seasons ago. I think that those sorts of conferences are just good for college basketball, and good for those of us that are looking to be able to bet on these games night in and night out.
Completely agree, Greg. And I don't know how much everybody's looked at the schedule, but on opening night, we have a Sun Belt versus MAC challenge. So we're going to get to see some of the better programs square off with one another. Arkansas State, Troy, JMU, Louisiana. Then on the MAC, you got Kent State, Toledo, Ohio. It's going to be a really cool litmus test right off the bat on two leagues that are always really good at the top and are wide open year in and year out and have won NCAA tournament games. I do agree with you. It does seem like McNeese, May, and Gonzaga probably have the two biggest gaps in their league just from 1 to 2 because St. Mary's lost so much. And Stephen F., I think, is still a step behind. And then Vermont's always dominant in the America East. But for the most part, the more and more I'm diving into these mid-majors, I think parity is at an all-time high in college basketball.
I think so as well. And especially I see that in the power conferences as well, because certainly you're going to have your teams that are going to be favorites in the conference. Like I think that Kansas is going to be one of the best teams in all of college basketball. But when you're in a conference with Houston, when you've got Baylor, Iowa State, all of those great teams out there, it's very difficult to be able to win that conference. The Big Ten, I don't think that there's necessarily a top 8 team in that conference, but I don't think that there's a team really outside the top 75, top 80 in that conference. So I do think that it also extends up to these power conferences, especially with it being a new day and age where travel is going to be at an all-time high. And I think that being able to win on the road with these more spread out conferences where you're having to travel through multiple time zones is going to be more difficult than ever.
And what helps parity, too, I think, Greg, is all schedules are not equal. For example, in the Big 12, when you got 16 teams, you're not going to be able to play everybody twice. You're only playing, I think, 4 or 5 teams twice now. So playing Houston twice, Iowa State twice, Kansas twice, Arizona, Baylor twice is a lot different than playing Colorado twice, Oklahoma State, or Utah or Arizona State. So I think scheduling is a huge part. We're seeing this in college football right now, just with these mega conferences and how much it matters in getting to the conference championship games. I think it's also the same in these Power 4 leagues in college basketball with a 16 and an 18 team crazy league.
Yeah, it is going to be nuts to see what we get out there. The ACC is going to be a lot of fun as well because I feel like there's a pretty clear top 2 there with Duke and North Carolina, but those teams like Wake Forest, Miami, what are they going to be able to do this season as well? And I know that you guys over there at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network have been continuing on with your coaches series as well, and I know that you guys have done a great job getting a wide range of different coaches. And has there been one or two over the last few weeks that you just had a conversation with that coach and now you might be viewing that team a little bit differently, maybe not even in terms of results, but just how they're going to play in general? Because I always think that's so interesting, these teams that they decide to change around their style a little bit. And those are the teams where I think that you can find some massive advantages on, especially when it comes to the totals market.
I don't know if I have one from a totals that pops to mind. A.W. Hamilton in Eastern Kentucky, we just had him on. It'll be releasing this week. He spoke to it. They replace a ton, but he still is going to want to play that up-tempo, chaotic, where they press you all game. So I still think that even though they lose a lot of faces, a lot of familiar faces, I think that they are still going to play fast. I really like what Coach Fisher has coming back at Temple. I think they're going to be able to take the next step. I think Coach Plona taking over at Western Kentucky, they played really well down the stretch. And I know Lutz goes over to Oklahoma State, but Plona slides right in and he was able to maintain a lot of his roster. I think the Jackrabbits at South Dakota State might play a little bit slower this year just because they got a bunch of new faces and Coach Henderson, who always does such a great job with that program. And I think he's going to dummy it down to start. And I just can't wait for that opener between McNeese State and South Dakota State in the Pentagon on November 4th.
Oh, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that South Dakota State team as well. I use the Ric Flair mentality when it comes to South Dakota State out there in the Summit League. In order to be the man, you got to beat the man. But to your point, typically it's a team that just goes bombs away from three-point range. Now they've got a lot of size on that roster and a little bit less in the backcourt. So I think that is going to be a really interesting team to take a look at. And I know you, Ryan, are doing such an amazing job getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. You're interviewing all sorts of coaches. You're doing all sorts of conference previews and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yes, I appreciate you, Greg. You can find us over at the College Basketball Experience. We're about 8-9 conference previews in so far. We've had over 40 and closing in on 50 coaches for our off-season coaches tour. It's been really fun to just sit down with some of them. And we're going to be attending some of these media days coming up as well. So get your coverage over there as well. And then for you West Virginia Mountaineer fans, go check out the Ryan and Rush show. We're covering Mountaineers all year long.
Absolutely, they are, and it's going to be such a fun year for them out there in the Big 12, and it's just going to be a great year of college basketball in general. Less than 6 weeks away. Ryan can't wait for it, and I can't wait for it as well. A big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, and I hope that you have some, because we are getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. I want to know exactly what you want to hear to get set for the upcoming college basketball season. You have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, rain or shine, regular season and off season. We've got 4 conference previews remaining. We've got the Bigs, the Big 10, the Big East, and the Big 12, along with the SEC. So we'll be doing about one of those a week, and I'm going to get you set for what I hope to be the most profitable college basketball season ever. So appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.